Okay, we are in Mark chapter 10. Good morning. All right, so if you've read the book the last 3 weeks, you know Mark Moore says Jesus made 3 purpose statements for his life. Anybody know what the first one was?
Seek and save the lost. That was last week.
Yeah. Well, both the first and the second one were last week. We touched on the first one just briefly.
It's not come to serve, not to be served, but to serve.
And that's today's. All right, so you got number 3. She got number 2. Now what's number 1?
Serve God.
I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. All right, that's the first one. The one we went over last week was, I've come to seek and save those that are lost. And today we're looking at, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So that's the key verse for today. But we want to look at the story that goes with that verse. All right. So, if somebody would please start at verse 32 and read verse 34.
They were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We're going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise.
Okay. So, it says they're on their way up to Jerusalem. Now, we talked last week. We know last week with the verse that Jesus said, I've come to seek and save those that are lost. He was in Jericho. He healed blind Bartimaeus. He went to Zacchaeus' house. But he was on the road heading up the mountain. Where is he today? On the way to Jerusalem. Now that's an interesting phrase, because for the last several months Jesus has been on his way up to Jerusalem. So did he actually say this one before the verse we studied last week? Or did he say it on the road going up to Jerusalem? And the answer to that question, we don't really know. It could have been before he got to Jericho. It could be after Jericho. We're not sure. But it probably would be after he'd left Jericho. But we don't know for that for certain. But how are the disciples feeling?
Astonished and afraid.
Astonished and afraid. And what are they astonished about?
I think that he would be telling them that.
Well, he hadn't actually told them yet when it tells us their feelings.
I think at this point they were aware that the Pharisees actually did not like Jesus. So the disciples may be thinking that group may be planning something.
Possible. That's possible. If it is while he's on the road going up after he's left Jericho and he's making that trip up the mountain, how many people were following him? All the scripture says is a crowd. But they're going up to worship for the Passover. Now, remember what the Jewish people were thinking the Messiah was coming for? Okay? With them looking at the crowd and them thinking like a Jewish person would think that he's going to set up his kingdom at this point, that would be astonishing to think about, wouldn't it? But would it also make you afraid? Anytime there's a change in the regime, doesn't that kind of...
Also, it says in 23 through 29 through 31, it says that Jesus was talking to him and saying that you've left your houses and homes and banks and everything. You know, so since the disciples was thinking like everybody else that he was set up a kingdom here, they thought they were saved with him. But now he's telling them, you're not safe with me. I'm me.
There's a whole bunch of things that can enter into this whole amazed and afraid idea. And so there's a lot of that. And some of that discussion that you're talking about kind of gave them sort of the idea that there were chief seats in the kingdom to be desired, that they were all going to sit on thrones, but they wanted the best throne, not the lower one. So there's all these kind of things that are playing in through their mind. And so they're excited, they're amazed, and yet they're afraid because, well, you know, the future is so uncertain. You don't know what might happen, kind of thing. All right? But then, Jesus makes his prediction in verse 33 and 34. What prediction does he make?
And he's going to be crucified.
All right? Here we got, I'm going to Jerusalem to die. Now, other places when Jesus has told his disciples that, remember Peter rebuked him for saying that. And they didn't want to hear that he was going to die. They didn't want to hear that idea. All right? But this is the third time that we know about that Jesus has predicted his death. This time he gives us 7 specific things that are going to happen to him. All right? So this is the most specific time he's told them he's going to die. Because now he doesn't just tell them he's going to die, but he tells them 7 very specific things that are going to happen. What are those 7 very specific things?
He's going to be delivered to the chief priests and the teachers of the law.
All right, first thing, he's going to be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes.
They'll mock him.
The first thing is he'll be betrayed.
Yeah. Then Jesus will be condemned to that,
All right, he's going to be condemned to death.
handed to the Gentiles.
All right, so who condemned him to death?
The chief priests and teachers.
All right, they did. Then they handed him over to the Gentiles, specifically who we're talking about. All right, who was the pilot? All right. All right, and then what's going to happen?
They'll mock him.
Now who's going to mock him?
The Gentiles.
The Roman soldiers. They mock him. And then they spit on him. All right. And what's next? All right, flog him, kill him, and then one more thing's going to happen. Third day he's going to rise again.
He said more than 7.
Huh? Well, they all kind of, yeah, it depends on how you want to put it down. McGarvey says it's 7, so I put down 7.
By the time you hear all this bad news, they don't hear that he's going to raise you today. You know,
They probably don't. And they don't understand any of it. Because they're expecting, they're going to Jerusalem, they're going to set up the throne, Jesus is going to reign. That's what they're thinking. And so he gives them all these specifics, and they don't grasp it. They don't understand it. So, but with Jesus giving all of these specific things that are going to happen, what does that tell us about Jesus?
He knows the future.
All right? And how could he know the future? Because he's God. Right. You know, and we say he knew everything, and he did, but in his human form he was still somewhat limited. But remember, last week's purpose was I came to seek and save the lost. Well, how is he going to seek and save the lost? Exactly this right here. And remember back to when we studied why Jesus had to be baptized. The whole idea was pointing to the cross. Why he had to be baptized. So Jesus never lost sight of what his mission was. And all three of his purpose statements state exactly what his purpose was. Said in different ways, but it's all saying the same thing. That the reason he came was to die. And then he would be raised again. Alright, so this tells us a whole lot about Jesus. Even when we go all the way back to when he was in the temple and he made the statement, don't you know it must be about my Father's business. Even at that point, he must have known what the future was. Alright? So, somebody pick up at verse 35 and read through 42.
Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. You don't know what you are asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them.
Okay. What request does James and John make?
Yeah, I see this as children of parents. And the doctor has given the mama or the daddy sentence that they're going to be dying. And so some of the children get with mom and daddy and the rest of the children are around and say, hey, look, mama, I want this piece, and everyone says, I want that piece.
But
Okay.
they didn't fully understand it.
Pardon?
They didn't fully.
No, they don't. They don't. And Jesus makes that plain. They don't know what they're asking. But yeah, somebody walk up to you and say, I want you to give me whatever I ask. Well, no wonder you're going to say yes to that automatically. Yeah, and Jesus said, well, what is it you want, you know? But, now Mark tells us James and John made the request. Who actually made the request? Their mother. All right? Matthew tells us that, Matthew 20:20. Anybody know her name?
Is it Mary? There's a couple.
Not Mary. Not Mary.
There's a couple Marys. Or is it?
A couple of Marys in the Bible, but this was not Mary. Salome. Now, not the one that danced for John the Baptist's head, but this is another Salome. All right? Who is Salome, other than the mother of James and John? Who else is she related to?
She's related to Jesus'
Jesus' mother's sister. Now, how do we know that?
Would you tell us?
All right.
Somewhere in the Bible that this,
Yeah, somewhere out
And
there.
this Jesus-
Most of the time, when we think about the women at the cross, we think about three. There was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and Mary the wife of Cleopas. But if you go to the Gospel of John, there were four. All right? The fourth one, let's see, where does John tell us? John 19:25. Somebody read that. John 19:25.
Therefore the soldiers did these things. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his brother's sister, Mary, wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene.
All right. So John adds in Mary and then Mary's sister. Why didn't he name her?
I don't know.
Let me ask you this. Does John name himself in his gospel? He doesn't. What does he refer to himself as in his gospel? The disciple whom Jesus loved. All right? But he never names himself. So why would he name his mother? He tells us a relationship, though, that is very important. His mother's sister. So that's how we know Salome was Mary's sister.
Do we know whether or not Mary had more than one sister?
We don't.
Right. So, maybe it was he was trying to be, sort of making her secure that nobody knows who it was, if he named her by name rather than sister, because if she had more than one sister, then they would know who it was. I mean,
Okay.
they would.
And I'm still a little confused. How was James and John's mother sister to Mary?
Because she is. Yeah.
I'm still getting confused on this because from the verse 25, at the cross of Jesus stood his mother, so Jesus' mother,
Okay.
and then Jesus'
All right.
mother's sister.
All right, let me make it a little bit more clear. Go on to John. Where in John do they go to the tomb? John chapter 20. Is it John that names him at the tomb? Or is it?
20 is Jesus is alive, continues to work.
No, that's where Mary Magdalene went first, and then Peter and John. So it's not John, maybe it's Mark. Let's go back to Mark. What did you say, Jay?
I said John 20 was the story of Jesus.
Yeah, but that's not the right one. Go to John, go to the end of Mark. Mark chapter 16.
Mark 16.
Mark chapter 16, and I'll answer your question.
Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph.
And?
I just have two.
Keep reading. You got Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and
And Salome.
Mark 16:1.
Oh, you're going to 16 now.
Yeah, Mark 16:1.
And the Sabbath was over Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body.
Okay. Now, so Salome shows up in Mark at the tomb. Who was responsible for preparing a here Mark refers to her as the mother of James, and we're talking about Jesus' brother James and Salome. Why would Salome be there?
Again, family.
Family. Mary's sister.
And here's Joanne in Luke's account.
Hmm?
From the resurrection, they came back from the tomb to all the distinguished Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others.
Man, you threw me a curveball I didn't study.
Where are you?
He's in Luke.
Yeah, Luke 24, verse like 9 and 10. When the woman who came back from the tomb, Joanne is mentioned. It does say there are others, so it could be also the Salome.
Salome.
Salome. So then I'm just wondering what's the relation with Joanna.
Well, again, whoever she is, it must be some family relationship. Now, I know Mary Magdalene shows up in all those places, and I don't think Mary is family. But Mary was so close to Jesus, she went everywhere Jesus went. She went along with the family. But and we still have that kind of thing today, you know, when somebody goes to a funeral home or things, somebody that they're extra close to may go along with them. And so that would be the case with Mary Magdalene. But all these other people have to be related to Jesus in some way.
Now, Joanna could have been Mary's sister also, because we didn't know who her sisters.
Right, we don't know how many sisters she had.
But most likely was.
It could very well be.
Because
And I need to check that out. I didn't check out
I'm
Joanne.
on it.
Huh?
I'm on it.
Oh, you're on it.
You look at this verse and the one talking about the sister, Mary's sister, at the tomb. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so it makes me think that Joanna is.
Yeah, and they very well could be, I'm not real sure. But here's the thing, we can definitely tie Salome in here as being the sister. Family is at the tomb. Now, that makes the story a whole lot more interesting. All right? Because James and John are Jesus' first cousins. And Salome is his aunt. And apparently the three of them had got together and conceived this whole idea about asking this. Now, who thought of it first, I don't know. But Salome went along with it. So why is it significant that Salome is the one that actually asked Jesus for James and John to have the chief seats?
But when did keep it in there?
Yeah. You know. Could have been his favorite aunt. Because John was the disciple whom Jesus loved. I mean, John was the one Jesus was the closest to.
Okay. Joanna was the wife of Cusa, C-U-C-A, the manager of Herod's household.
All right? Still doesn't tell us anything about the relationship.
Could have been a little bit of an authority to get the tomb open.
That's
They
possible.
were helping to support them out of their own means. They were helping to support.
Yeah, there were a lot of wealthy women and Greek women that helped support Jesus.
Yeah, out of their own means.
Right. So, it may be like you're saying, because they're still thinking that the tomb is sealed when they go to the tomb. So, somebody coming from Herod's household would give authority to open that tomb. I mean, that's very plausible to think about. That may be why she was there. All right? I'll dig into that a little bit more. Who in the world is Joanne? All right. But so, if we go with the idea that Salome very well could be Jesus' favorite aunt, since James was his favorite cousin, John was his favorite cousin. You know, your favorite aunt comes to you and makes a request. hard to say no to her, isn't it? And so that's probably what James and John are thinking. Mom, if you ask, we can get them. So they put her up to ask him.
Well, maybe she just wanted to test for her son.
And maybe she did. Maybe she did.
Looks like
And the whole thing is still a total misunderstanding of what Jesus' kingdom is. Mhm. All right? Had Jesus had this discussion with his disciples before?
Other ways, and before they always picked out who's the greatest of them.
Okay, especially like right after the story about the children. Jesus said, let the little children come to me, and unless you become like one of these little children, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. And then they go right into that argument. All right? They have this argument going up the hill, because well, we're going to get to the argument part in a little bit. But here's this request, and then it's going to lead to an argument about who can be the greatest in the kingdom. And when does it happen again?
Had to be during the Last Supper.
Right. Right before Jesus got up and washed their feet. To teach them a little bit about humility. And so this verse, the Son of Man came to serve and not to be served, is illustrated by this story here. It's also illustrated by Jesus washing their feet. And remember again, Peter objected. He didn't understand anything. Jesus told him, unless I wash you, you have no part of me. Then Peter wanted Jesus to give him a bath. Jesus said, I don't need to give you a bath, your feet are dirty. That sort of thing. So that's the request. What motivated this request?
what motivation we was talking about, you don't really know whether she was wanting it for her sons or whatever reason it might be, such as she just happened to want it for her sons. Could be that, or it could be that she felt like if anybody's going to be there, why couldn't it be my two sons?
Okay.
So,
It's probably maybe a little prestige.
All right. There's some selfishness and greed that's involved here.
but again, it may not be greed or selfishness at all. It may be that she didn't know.
Well, it comes from a total misunderstanding. And even still today, we have to be careful. Because it would be easy to run the church like a business. But is the church supposed to be run like a business? No. But there are a lot of churches that do operate like a business. And then when you take on the business model, then the whole idea is how high up the ladder can I go? Where you take on Jesus' model, it's what do I have to do to serve you? And Jesus' example was washing your feet. The closest thing I could think about that for us today would be cleaning toilets. The most important guy in the kingdom, should he be cleaning toilets? Well, business model says no. That's somebody else's job.
You do that, yes.
But, that's it. The whole idea is service. How can I serve? Cleaning toilets is a job that has to be done. I don't know anybody really likes it, but it has to be done, right? So you do it. That's the whole idea. How can I serve you? Not how high up the ladder can I get. It's what we got to watch out All right. So how does Jesus end up responding to them?
Well, he asked him, you could, say, the cup I drink.
All right. So he says, you don't really know what you're asking for. Secondly, can you drink the cup that I'm about to drink? Can you be baptized with the baptism I'm about to be baptized with? Now, let's think about that, the cup and the baptism. Why does he use those metaphors?
Is it something we're willing to do? Because I think this is like the cup of suffering.
All right, yeah, the cup of suffering. And the cup is often used with an idea of suffering. All right, so that's, can you drink the cup I'm about to drink? Can you suffer what I'm about to face? What about the baptism?
It's going to be death.
Well, his baptism was for our salvation.
Well, the one he
Okay.
had before, we're saying an example, but he said, Jesus saying that I'm going to be baptized.
All right, so yeah, before it's pointing to the cross, now we're talking about the cross. We're talking about the overwhelming suffering that he's going to have to face. All right, it's because when you're baptized, what happens? The water overwhelms you, right? Okay, and so here he's talking about the overwhelming aspect of the suffering. Because the worst possible death, the cruelest form of death man has ever invented, is crucifixion. Could they handle it?
Yeah.
And you talk about the chief seats at his crucifixion, who was on his right and who was on his left? Yeah, thieves, murderers, insurrectionists. All right. Sinners, who came to die for, right? Seek and save those that were lost. In fact, one of them, he told him, today you'll be with me in paradise. All right. So, in what sense was it true they didn't know what they were asking?
They didn't understand. Just like we don't understand it today. We weren't studying this lesson when I was just thinking. I've read through this many times. I didn't understand it the way you just described it. And I don't think they understood it either.
Maybe they didn't realize what kind of seats they were going to be.
Right. They didn't know. They didn't know. But in what sense were they drinking the cup? Or would they, let me put it this way, in what sense would they drink the cup and be baptized with the baptism he was baptized with?
James,
Nothing.
James would be beheaded,
James was beheaded for preaching the gospel.
and then, was it attempted poisoning? No, we got to put John at first, but then set to the island.
John gets sent to the Isle of Patmos. And the Isle of Patmos, I mean, we think, well, wow, big deal. An island out in the sea. But it wasn't like one of the tropical islands we think about. It was nothing but a big rock where John was put.
And also you could think of that as loneliness. Being
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah. So John was out there all by himself, on this rock.
Because a lot of people die from loneliness.
Yeah. So John is the only apostle that we know did not die from martyrdom, but he was a martyr in the sense he was banished to Patmos.
At least he could still send mail.
Pardon me?
At least he could still send mail. There's one
Yeah.
book, right?
Yeah, and that's where he had the revelation, so, and recorded all that for us. So he got to spend a lot of time with Jesus on that rock. All right.
But when people are lonely, they need
Okay? They should. Not all people that are lonely do, but I mean, it's, if you got Jesus, you really shouldn't be lonely.
I mean, they even pray for somebody to come to visit them or call or whatever.
Okay, so what's the final response Jesus gave them about their request?
It's not going to grant.
All right, he couldn't grant that request. Who could? God could, but Jesus couldn't. All right? Why is that?
But he was the son of man, but he came, seek and serve.
Okay?
Jesus is not there yet.
He came to serve and to give his life.
And you know, God's the one that exalts people, right? Even Jesus was exalted after his resurrection, right? He was exalted and sat on David's throne. God did that for him. So I mean, I know Jesus knew that was his, but God put him there. And the book of Revelation talks about the thrones and the apostles sitting on thrones. They're all going to sit on thrones, but God's going to put them in the right place. Right? And we're supposed to rule and reign in God's new kingdom, but He's the one that's going to decide where we rule and reign and what we rule and reign over. Okay? That wasn't Jesus' place to do. Okay. So, how did the other apostles react?
They weren't happy with the two that asked because they felt like they left out.
They were indignant.
Yeah.
But why are they indignant?
Maybe because they didn't think of that first.
Exactly. James and John got to Jesus before they could. That's what they were indignant about. They all wanted those seats. All right? So that's what they're indignant about. Now, what kind of people were considered to be great among the Gentiles?
Rulers and high officials.
Okay? And particularly, which rulers are we talking about? When we're talking about Gentile rulers, which ones are we particularly talking about here?
The chief priests,
Now, that would be Jewish.
A centurion. Maybe one of the command's men. Or are you going higher up?
We're going up higher. Let's go to Herod and Pilate. Herod was king, right? He was the king. Now, because he wanted that power, did other people have ways of manipulating and controlling him?
I bet everybody in life has people.
Yeah, let's get the real picture, the real story.
His wife.
We go back to Salome, not the Salome that's Mary's sister, but the other Salome. Herod's wife, which was Herod's brother's wife, and Herod stole his brother's wife. And she didn't like John the Baptist because John the Baptist kept telling Herod what a sin he had committed by taking his brother's wife. And so she put her daughter up to dancing for Herod in a way that pleased him, and he told her he'd give her anything she wanted, up to half the kingdom. And what'd she want? The head of John the Baptist. Did Herod want to kill John the Baptist? No. Herod was afraid to kill John the Baptist. He's the king. Why did he have to give in to her?
Because she controlled.
He wanted to keep his power. And to keep his power, he cut off the head of John the Baptist. What about Pilate? Pilate's the Roman governor over this area. Was he afraid of the Jews? Very definitely. Very definitely. When they took Jesus to Pilate, they said, you either do what we want done, or we're going to call Rome and say, you're no friend of Caesar's. What's Pilate going to do? You know, he washed his hands and said, I'm not responsible for this innocent man's blood. But he was, because he gave the order. All right? But he wanted to keep his power. In order to keep his power, he had to give in to what the Jews wanted. For Herod to keep his power, he had to give in to something he didn't want. That's what tells us about the top of the ladder. When you're at the top of the ladder, there are people that have got all kinds of things they use against you. And if you want to stay up at the top of the ladder, you better be doing some favors for these people down here. That's not what Jesus' kingdom is all about, by any means. So, somebody read 43 through 45 real quick.
Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Okay, so what did Jesus say about the character of those who want to be great in God's kingdom?
And if you serve,
You got to be a servant. Total opposite of what the world would say. You got to be a servant if you want to be great. So, and the example that Jesus gave to illustrate is himself, his death on the cross. Son of Man came to serve, not to be served, and to give his life as a ransom for me.
A great military leader will always go with the man. Usually it does.
Right? They're not afraid to serve. In fact, if any leader should understand that, if you want to lead, you need to be out in front and let everybody follow. All right, any other thoughts or questions? Chad, would you lead us in a closing prayer, please?
Father God, we thank you for this day and thank you for a chance to read from your word, learn more about how Jesus saw himself in his purpose, God. Pray that as we go through life, we don't become like the leaders who just want to be seen as powerful or seen as rulers by others. We listen to your word and listen to what you have us to do. Pray that you bless us as we transition to time of group worship. In Jesus' name we pray.